and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who spent 5 hours in the character creator before he realized there was a whole game beyond that.
Tim Longo. Nice.
Yeah, I do like to pick on you.
Yeah, I definitely.
What game were you playing? Was this Ghostlands or whatever?
Oh, you're talking about Wildlands. You're talking about
Wildlands.
my tweet?
Ghost Recon. Sorry, Wildlands.
Yeah, Ghost Recon Wildlands. Yeah. Did you see that?
I saw. Yeah, and then I picked on you, and you made a good image of Snake.
Yeah, I recreated Solid Snake or whichever snake. Could be Venom Snake, could be Naked Snake. Yeah, could be probably
could be Raiden with a snake mask. Could be could be Iroquois Pliskin.
You could just say Big Boss.
Yeah,
and leave it at that. That's good. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, that was very well done. I do want to tell you, as a former AI programmer, the enemies won't treat you differently based on the amount of time you spend.
It doesn't matter. It's what's going on in my head. Because I'm playing as Snake.
You're going to have the whole, smoke and mirrors thing going, where you're going to think that they treat you differently. I guess. Okay.
Have you ever seen those YouTube videos of those guys that go around like a city acting as Snake with like cardboard boxes and everything?
You mean Mega 64?
Oh, Mega 64 did it. That was right. Yeah. There's been a series of them, and I don't think they're all them, but they did the best ones, yeah.
Yeah, they do some really good
That's ones. How I play Wildlands. Like, I just go around and, like, hide in plain sight and pretend they don't see me, And they're like, no, you don't. I'm right. You can't see me. And then they kill me.
No, that's good. That's pretty well done. Well, we are...
we're not here to talk about that.
No, we're not. We because this game doesn't even have any kind of serious character creation, at least... up front.
That's what threw me, because I was like, you don't get to choose anything.
But you do. Through the whole time, you're determining what can change the nature of a man.
Nothing.
No. A player character. Clearly.
What did you answer?
Not
to jump into that, but...
Yeah, not to jump into that. What did I answer?
When she asked you. Or did you
say I don't know?
That might have been. There was for me, there were 8.
There were a lot of choices.
8 possibilities.
I
said nothing.
I might have said nothing, which makes me sad that we said something.
It's the most nihilistic.
It really is. It's so come on.
It felt like the best.
Nothing's going to change how this is going, lady.
Yeah.
We are, of course, talking about Planescape Torment, and he's talking about Ravel Puzzlewell and an encounter with her. And we do need to, at some point, kind of address the story, because we've really been skirting it.
We've been talking around it, and it's just so dense to talk about. I don't even know.
It is and it isn't. I mean,
it's true. It's pretty simple. Its spine is very simple. It's just, there's a lot of meat.
10,000, you look at the 10,000 mile view. It's like, okay, Guy doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
Guy seeks out the steps along the way to find out who he is. Guy maybe discovers who he is, and we'll see what happens towards the end of the game. But, fundamentally, it's MacGuffin after MacGuffin. It's, find Farid, find your journal, and Farid tells you, actually, I don't really know that much. You should go and find, I think he tells you to find Ravel.
Yes.
Because then you go back up to the Hive and the Clerk's Ward and the Lower Ward and all that. So you kind of have that first signpost, but it's really always been I want to figure out who I am and what I'm about. And the next step along the way, which theoretically we got to last week, was Ravel Puzzlewell, and then the next big signpost is something she gives you, which is this diva, which is more or less an angel. And I don't think you got far enough to uncover that, so I don't want to kind of go into that too much.
Well, I got too cursed. Right. The town, I guess, is a town in the Outlands, and I watched that battle happen. Ridiculous battle between her and him. I guess is that? Well, I don't know. I guess we don't know who that is. That I assume that's. Oh no, it's probably just another. There's probably the bigger bad guy. I don't know if it's the angel or not. Maybe so don't tell me. But But by the way, incidentally, I wrote a note down. I think the voice actor for that guy that she battles in that weird cutscene. Did you recognize that guy?
Oh God, he sounded really familiar, and I thought about it at the time. Was he like the bad guy in The Crow or something like that?
No, he was. I'm 99% sure he was the voice actor for the old god in Soul Reaver.
Oh no,
that we just played. Yeah, I think it's the same era, so I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay,
we'll have to look it up, but sounded just like him. Anyway,
that's an amazing thing. Okay, do you have an idea? Let's see, what the heck was his name?
Oh yes, I don't know. Soul Reaver old. It was like old one or old.
Well, yeah, no, but what his name would have been in this?
I don't. Well, they haven't revealed it yet, to me at least.
All right, let me look up Soul Reaver.
He's a weird looking character, but yeah, back to your kind of quick thread of the story. Yeah, I mean it is pretty simple. We just have these sort of tentpole story moments that you're going toward, and really everything in between is either, like we talked about last time, fetch quests that lead you from one to the other to get to that tentpole story moment, but really it's just kind of like, I mean, I don't want to call it busy work in a negative way. It's just a series of gates along the way to get you to where you want to go. So if you just did those tentpole story moments, the game would be pretty short. But they just fill it up with all this other stuff that fills out the world and stuff. But I guess in the grand macro story sense, it's actually pretty simple. You're right.
Wow, I think you might be right. I think this is the Transcendent One. I don't think that's who the Transcendent One is.
Whoa, no, actually it is. Because, it is. I didn't know what it meant, but when they're battling in that ridiculous cutscene, which... So we got to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, we should probably get
into that. It shows the text of and it says Ravel, fireball or whatever, and then it says Transcendent One, spell, right. And I didn't know what it meant. Right. I thought Transcendent One was a spell, but then it dawned on me that's the character's name.
That's the character's name. You're right. Well done.
Oh, so it is the same guy?
It's the same. It's Tony J.
Yes.
Nicely done. Wow.
I mean, in Soul Reaver, you hear him so much, right? He narrates so much for you. He's one of the more memorable voice actors.
I think I recently played a game in which it was a bad guy from some movie I'd watched. I think it was The Crow. Guy that had this amazing guttural low voice. Oh, it was Darksiders 2, and it was.
Oh, yeah, maybe he's in that too. And I picked
it out. Yeah, he is. It's not Tony J, but it's not a low, raspy voice. And I was confused, I think. But
plenty of those out there.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, no, good crap. That's a good one. Yeah, so this is, I'm kind of curious. I mean, that is kind of the broad story, and we should talk about that cutscene a little bit more. I guess let's just grab it now. Because that's a weird thing. Like, you go, and most of this encounter with Ravel is this weird philosophical conversation with her.
I love the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, when I say weird, that's not bad.
Yeah.
For listeners. Like, for me, weird is like, oh, I haven't seen something like this before. This is awesome. Especially when it comes to games. And so you have this conversation which is very philosophical in nature, and she's asking you a lot of questions, and you've kind of got this dual thing going on, whereas as a player, you're like, okay, what do I answer here? What's the path through this dialogue with this person who is spent a lot of time alone? And as a person who spends a lot of time alone, I can say, you're not always at your best when you're having conversations.
I knew you were a Night Hag.
Yeah, that's me. I'm a Night Hagrid? I don't know. But anyway, so you're kind of like mechanically like, well, what's going to get me through this conversation? Because so much of this game has been about conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what is going to get me? Yeah, it really is. What is going to get me through this conversation in the best way? Like,
I had trouble. Yeah, I mean, I
to go through forward and.
I had trouble with
there's a later conversation that you didn't get to yet, which is even more dire.
Oh no!
And I can't wait till you get to it. Well, we'll talk about it next week. But mechanically, it's like, well, okay, I want to get the information I need, which is what does she know?
Yeah.
And what can she tell me about what I need to know if she doesn't have all the information? Of course she doesn't, because the game's not over yet. So, we've got that to thread through. And at the same time, as just a human being, some of the things that she wants you to say, you're like, well, I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that. Like she wants you to say, and one of the options about a number of characters is, I don't care about this character. And I don't know, I just feel badly saying that, even about fictional characters that have no,
Even though I'm playing sort of semi, like, I don't know, chaotic
even though
kind
you're playing
of...
a dick. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, this is a clean podcast. I still couldn't do it. I still couldn't bring myself to talk, and I haven't, in the grand scheme of things, some of those characters I hadn't spent very much time with. Yeah. I still don't even have a full party. Darn it.
Really? So how many do you have?
I have
who do you have?
All but one. All but one slot's full. I have Anna, Mort, Dakon, and Grace, and that might be it.
Fall from Grace. Yeah,
Fall from Grace. Yeah.
The sixth one that I was able to get was Ignis, who was the Burning Man.
Yeah, I didn't figure out the flask, the endless flask thing. I didn't.
Oh, I bet you missed.
I didn't figure out what the word, the release word is, or whatever, the trigger word.
So what you needed for him, because you're not going to, at this point, you won't be able to. You might be able to go back when you get back to Sigil, but if you go back, if you're in the Drowned Nations, if you ever went there,
yeah,
you can find a.
I have the flask.
The decanter of endless water.
Yeah, I have it.
Oh, well, you can just pour it on the grate that he's on.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I talked to. Darn it. Oh man, see, I have a little bit of a bone to pick related to. I want to get to the Ravel door and key puzzle / quest in a second. Kind of related to this, but just the usability of stuff.
You mean finding her the portal and
just
like
all the pieces of it.
Yeah.
I only looked at one hint so far, and it was finding the door, the portal. But anyway, yeah. So I just missed it. I just missed that because you talk to his friend or keeper or lover or something.
Yeah,
in there, right?
This woman who loves him. This woman who burns for him, you might say.
You get some dialogue option where somebody says, "Do you know the right word to?" I forget what it said. The right word to use the decanter or something, and I didn't. So I thought I had to go. So I gave up, basically. I was like, well, so it must have been a misunderstanding or a red herring or something. So, okay. Well, that's fun.
Or there's another solution that we don't know, like that I don't know.
But if you just pour, I have the decanter, if you can just pour it on the crate.
You can basically just talk to him, I think, and then use the decanter. I think you get that as an option or something like that.
Maybe I didn't even try talking to him because I figured he was just inaccessible. Yeah. Anyway, so I know you can get a Mordon as well.
A modron, you mean?
Modron. A Morlock. Modron. But and I talked to those ones in the one brothel, but I never kind of got through there. I guess they must not be the ones you can take, or I didn't figure that out. So I just left Sigil with just one slot open, which is probably not smart. There's also another guy that neither of us have that I don't know where he is. I just saw him in a screenshot. I don't know who he is.
Another guy. Huh?
Yeah, he's got like a bluish face with maybe red eyes. Kind of looks like maybe he had a hood on. I don't know. I didn't do any research because I didn't want to spoil any more. But I saw him in a screenshot.
Okay. Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't really look into that, and I was able to get Ignis. I was a little worried that Ignis was going to be evil and kind of pull me in that direction. So I felt a little weird about it. But he's just, I think, chaotic neutral, maybe. So he's just kind of an agent of chaos, but not that mattered. I'm not lawful. I think I found an artifact or something that I could use if I was lawful good.
I found that too. I can't use it.
I don't remember what it was. Maybe an eye. It might have been an eye.
I want to make sure we don't miss a point you made earlier that, just really quickly to reinforce it, I think is a great point, that this doesn't have a character creation step in it as an RPG, but the whole game is basically a character creation motif, and I think that's a really good, interesting, fairly wacky point. And I'm hope. Fingers crossed. When we have somebody on, we should ask them about it.
We can ask them. Yeah, no, I think that's really a part of the game and part of a theme of the game. And actually, one of the topics I didn't call up from the past, but now that you've gotten this far,
I mean, you're discovering your character in a way, right? You're not even making a character; you're discovering it as you play.
Kind of making these decisions and kind of discovering who you are, but still as a player,
making
you have choices to do that. Like you can choose to be a different class, for example, or even push your alignment in different directions.
Or which life of his are you? Like this is just another one of his lives, and so you're choosing how this one's going to go down. Especially when they talk about the shades and all that stuff, where each of those shades are a past life.
Yeah, and absolutely
pissed at you.
That gets more.
I love that.
It gets really touched on much deeper in this other encounter you'll come across. Okay. Yeah, it's coming. But one of the things that at this point I think we've covered all of the ones that are going to happen, maybe except for I don't remember the Fortress of Regrets very well, but it's like the other theme is like mazes.
You mentioned that last time. So
I mentioned this a while ago. It's like mazes, and I think that's meant to be for the player, not just the mazes that you actually experience, these physical mazes of like navigating these spaces, like Ravel's in one. If you get the modron maze toy, you can find your way.
It's part of the toy.
It's the toy. You can actually manipulate that thing.
Oh, I have the toy.
In such a way that it opens a portal.
Oh, and what are you doing there?
It sends you into an endlessly repeating dungeon. Well, no, it's more complicated than that. So you go in and you're like in this easy mode of this dungeon where there's modrons. They're not even modrons. They're like statues that you can go in and they're like robots that fight you. And you fight the robots and it's like you're getting a few, 500 XP per robot or whatever. And you're just going room by room and they're each like effectively 20 by 20 rooms or something like that. They're small spaces where everybody can fit, 30 by 30, something like that. And you're kind of like meandering through this thing and you're like, what is the point of this and how do I get out? And so ultimately, if you follow the first one long enough, you'll find your way to a room where there's a bunch of modrons and they're all confused because like the director modron of this dungeon they're trying to recreate, they're trying to understand human behavior by recreating dungeons and making, and having
like rats in a trap kind of thing?
Exactly. Basically by having people go through this dungeon and play it and they'll gauge their responses. And
that's meta.
Whatever. It's a so modron thing. Exactly. It's very meta. And it ties into the mazes thing as well because it is a maze. Like you kind of. I was going and I started putting map markers on each screen. Like, okay, I've already been through this door or whatever, just so I would know to make my way back. Because you run out of health. Like, what do you do?
You can't. Yeah, you can't.
Ultimately, you convince a modron that okay, since your director is gone, I'll be the new director. And like I tried different difficulty settings, and I spent hours on this. Not this week, but last week.
This is like a Chocobo thing.
Yeah, it was it was random. Like I was fiddling with the modron toy, and you can have a little dialogue with Mort where you basically pick on Mort, where you're using it like an action figure. Like, haha, it does this thing, and it, I don't know. It's a funny little conversational gambit. But if you keep playing with it, you'll find that like one of the things that you do makes it do something different. Like if you have 6 buttons and you push them in a certain order, and it's basically like that. It's like, if you pull its right leg or something like that, it goes click instead of whir, and you can work your way through this little maze, honestly, of how this thing works, and it creates a portal, and you go in there, and now you're stuck in the modron dungeon.
Do you get anything out of it once you finish it?
Well, you get a lot of XP out of it. Because you're going through and it's like 500 XP per kill, and like every room has 1 or 2 enemies, maybe 3 enemies, and then if you become when you talk to the modron who's kind of the boss or whatever, you can tell him, okay, I want to reset it, and you can set the difficulty of the dungeon. So it goes from like 500 XP robots to like, I don't know if it's 1,000, maybe 2,000, and then 4,000, and they get more difficult, like they're harder to kill. So you're getting like XP for everything you kill, and ultimately one of them will drop. They drop like fake loot. I mean, it's really funny. I mean, I'll get to that in a second, but ultimately one will drop something that you can use as a portal to get back. You know, so you like, and I actually reset the thing several times. It was like because you basically go to it and you say, well, reset it, and you can ask them the rules that are like, well, don't leave anybody behind who's dead, because if you reset it, they'll be lost forever. And you're like, oh my god, you know, like, ugh.
Wow.
And you can rest in the room where the modrons are, but like you'll go and they'll say things like, I'm the evil wizard, ha ha ha, this is my plan, and then
it's like they're playing D&D.
Exactly, but it's totally like at the lowest possible level. It's really a very amusing kind of little thing.
It's AI playing D&D, like
it is. Yeah, like when you the first time you ever played it or something like that. It's very well done. But it's a maze too, right? And then I would honestly say, in a meta way, that the quests that are in, especially the Brothel of Intellectual Lusts and the sort of Clerk's Ward generally, is itself a maze.
Oh, totally. The brothel stuff just...
And I wanted to get into that with you, because that was like...
Yeah.
You know, I feel like identity is, for the authors of the game, a maze itself, or at least the identity of the Nameless One. And
yeah, he's going through
these several mazes, you know, Ravel and the Modron and the Intellectual Lusts subquests, there's a million of them. That's all part of his experience of like unraveling this puzzle. Oh, and his tomb, where you have to basically get yourself killed and teleported and killed and teleported, which we didn't discuss, but which was part of basically getting the sphere for Farid. You know, it feels like at each major step there's kind of a mini maze, or even a complicated maze, you know, of different types.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's meant to be like untangling this bigger problem. And there even turns out to be a Gordian knot at one point. So, you know, I think sometimes it's pretty on the nose. But anyway, I mean, you wanted to talk about the role of side quests, and the Clerk's Ward is like side quest heaven or hell, depending on your...
Yeah, it's probably the best game. Yeah, it's probably the best example. I don't know. I guess, and that was where, when I was leaving the Clerk's Ward finally, and that's where I guess I wrote this note down, and as is often the case for anyone who listens to the podcast consistently, they know that there's some point in every series that I end up having to rush because of life or whatever. And so that was last night for me, and I'm trying to kind of rush through, and I didn't even catch up all the way. But I just got to this point where, and I realized that one of the things that's changed for me this time specifically is that compared to both because I'm playing for the podcast, but B, I chose intentionally to play differently than I normally would play, because I'm the kind of person that will do every side quest no matter what, right? In any RPG that I play, when I'm playing strictly for fun. And it's just a thing that I have accepted about the way I play and my life. When I play games, I'm just going to do that. So it's not even a question, you know. But because I intentionally made the choice this time that I was going to be okay missing stuff, and that I was going to leave stuff behind, I guess they took on a different kind of role in my mind, and so I kind of like inherently care a little less about them than I normally do. And also, this is the second time playing the game, so maybe I feel a little differently, too, for that reason. But as I was going through the Clerk's Ward stuff, and especially in the brothel, where there's the critical path stuff is a maze, like you said, in and of itself, just getting the key, which is a brilliant key, by the way, just like... Right. A piece of her, but then it's like, what could a piece of her be? But, oh my God, it's her kid? And then the blood from her kid is the key. Like, brilliant. Oh,
it's amazing,
and I had forgotten about that from the first playthrough, luckily.
I had entirely... And in a game that's so much about, like, history...
Yeah.
You know, and of course, in the case of your character, it's, you know, you're one character living multiple lives. but in a sense, that's what a lineage is too, right? So there's lots of these kind of echoes, and encountering that again on a replay when I'm not kind of like feverishly curious about the main mystery, coming across that moment of reflection of like, her lineage is just as important as mine.
Mm-hmm. And she didn't know.
Her identity,
Yeah, and so the brothel is a good example because there's a bunch of them in that one kind of room structure, that building. But I guess there was a point when I just decided to kind of subconsciously, I decided to take a step back and think about them, side quests, academically for a second, and think to myself, okay, what is the real purpose of them? And I'm speaking generally in any game right now, but we should talk about this one specifically because there are some obvious mechanical things, and in this one, because combat isn't the focus, they're very important for XP, right, and balancing. Right. So if you don't do a lot of side quests, you may not be at a level that is appropriate. Like I went down to Under Sigil and got my butt handed to me.
Yeah, no, me too.
Yeah. And I think you come back there later, so maybe we're not supposed to go down there yet. But anyway,
yeah, I know that the creatures that I fought down there, I have since fought again, and I'm okay with them now. But when I was first there, I wasn't quite.
Yeah, it was too early. But so there's XP. There's obviously world building and character building, right? Because most side quests have nothing to do with the main quest. You don't need to do them. That's why they're a side quest. And so I just kind of have this crisis of confidence of like this sort of like filler concept. And what is? And I kind of just wanted to ask you, like, what is the role of a side quest and why are they important? And is it a pacing thing? Is it a, and I have various answers of my own, but.
It's funny.
Filler.
I was going to say, I think of them as a padding thing.
Yeah.
Because if I think about it as a because this is a D&D game, and so when I think of like a D&D game, I think, well, okay, if I'm the dungeon master of this game, and the players are chasing this one MacGuffin, and I hadn't planned that thing to be like a big deal, I change my focus. Like. I make that the thing that takes them back to the main path, and there are no side quests in a certain sense.
Yeah,
in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I think it's only when you get to,
the simulated
role playing game, and also you've got this issue of like, there's market issues. Well, it comes back. Last week you talked about how the audience is going to make a certain amount of determination, and ultimately you have to find an audience. And certainly in 1999, if your game isn't at least your role-playing game, God, is it not at least 20 hours, and probably more like 40 or 50, like that's just not going to fly with the role-playing community. Yeah. These days, things have started to contract, and we're okay with games that are. An action-packed, 10 to 15 hours maybe for a main campaign if it has multiplayer. Like, it's still way out of whack, because any movie is no more than 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever at the max for some of these, like, dire Marvel movies these days. But, like, fundamentally, games have this weird proposition to them that they've always had to be...
Yeah, it's a weird legacy, weird legacy thing.
Yeah. It's even weirder because when you think about arcade games, they were like only as good as your skill let them be, right? It's like so it's just a
and they were designed and tuned to take your money and stuff.
Right,
and
of course,
and I guess like another question to ask on this thread, and just to be clear, I don't want this to happen, but I guess. One of the things I like about doing the podcast is it's forcing me to not take things for granted, right? That I've previously as a player and a developer just assumed are a given, And so if I say to myself, what if all the side quests were taken out of this game, what would that mean to the game, And obviously it would be a lesser version of itself, and you wouldn't have sort of like these... I guess I'll say distractions away, or these sort of red herrings that might distract you from the main path, and you might confuse, which I've done multiple times.
But I wouldn't take it that way. What I would say is when I think about these thematic mazes that are happening, those are really just blind alleys that you follow. You know, and I honestly think that in a certain sense, like if you take the Clerk's Ward as a good example of like stuff that there's some stuff you don't need to do, and there's no way to pick out which you do or don't.
Yeah, and part of that's the usability of the game. That's frustrating.
Sure, but it's also like, you know, if the theme is mazes, or a theme is mazes,
then you
have to have a blind alley in a maze. Like, otherwise, what's the point? You might as well just make a straight line on a piece of paper. So, you know, I feel like those have to be there to reinforce the sense that you're trying to pick your way through this space.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say in most role-playing games, though, you can tell, you know, this is filler and this isn't.
I would like to think that, I'd love to think that they thought that much about them in this game, to your point.
Yeah, no,
as
in this,
blind alleys, but
no, fair enough. Like,
I think
they probably didn't take that far. Yeah.
I think to your previous point, it's padding, right? And the other important thing, the reason I would never want side quests to go away that I value in any game, and like I'm one of those guys that does I'm still working on it. I want to do every question mark in Witcher 3, you know, and that's a lot of time.
Whoa.
And
we'll still be talking about Witcher 3 in the third year of this.
No, I won't be done anytime soon. But I guess my point is the world building side of that, and the importance of filling that stuff out and really like sinking yourself into a world and essentially like a campaign. Is very valuable to me. So that's why I value side quests, and that's why I think I have made that rule for myself that I'm just always going to do most of them. But when I just, like I said, academically took that hat off and said, what if I didn't care about them? How would this game change? And I'm leaving stuff behind. Some of it is based on speed because I want to speed through, but some of it is like a little bit academic where I'm like trying to kind of do a little bit of weird soul searching of how do I feel when I don't do this? Like I have a bunch of stuff in my inventory that I'm sure has some story that will go with it that I'm just not going to do. And I've left Sigil now, right? So I probably won't go back to do most of them. And,
well, I mean, I think you have the opportunity to do so, but yeah, I mean, it's possible that you won't.
But I just made the choice, you know, and and it's just it's an uneasy for me specifically. It's an uneasy feeling, but it made me kind of rethink the value of them.
For me, it's still sticking in my craw that like I don't know how I'm gonna fulfill this vow to Deionnarra from the very first hour of the game of like I'm going to come back and make this right in some way. Like I don't know how that's going to happen.
There's not even a quest for that though, huh? There's not an old
there's not. And that's a weird thing in itself, right? I mean, it's just like that's a thing as a player that's in my mind. And of course, it's reinforced at different times. There's the advocate, who's her father in the Clerk's Ward, like that kind of reinforced. I assume you found that stuff. No, you had to. You had to.
Yeah, finding her father was another nice moment where I was like, oh, thing. Sweet. This is her dad, and the way that he spoke about her, and the surprise about kind of revealing who you were, and like the legacies and all that stuff was really neat. Really.
And it does. I mean, the game does a good job of making the characters not. I mean, I don't even want to say not two-dimensional, but just even more filled out than in most games.
Oh, totally. And that's why I think this game stands out. I do. Yeah, I mean, and I think, and it is just a testament to the writing and the commitment to, I guess what I'd say, and I think is another unique thing, I think we'll talk about this in the last episode when we kind of talk about big takeaways, but I'll flag it here so we remember maybe. One, we need to talk about party dynamics, and just, I feel like this was the first game, maybe Baldur's Gate 1 being another example, but this was the first game where the dynamics between the party members you have and talking to them and them talking to each other and the role they play was really prominent. And then the other one is just their commitment to focus on dialogue and the puzzling side of an RPG versus the combat. They just was fully committed to. Because it's the main way you get XP in this game, right? I mean, like you really need to do that stuff, and it kind of flips things on its side. And so anyone who isn't doing side quests, myself kind of included in this playthrough, I think I'm under-leveled, truthfully, right now. And I have one fewer member of my party.
Party member, yeah.
So I'm a little worried. The Ravel fight was actually pretty rough.
I'm worried for you for what's coming up, to be honest, but.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
That's par for the course for me in these games.
Making it a challenge for you. I mean, part of that ties into another topic that you had talked about in pre-show, which was... go ahead.
I want to ask you a quick question, though, about Final Fantasy. And I guess that will get maybe to the topic you're about to talk about. I didn't realize that. But on the side quest thing, my impression, though there was the Chocobo thing that you went off and did, which I didn't do, but my impression, one of the surprises we probably talked about in that series for Final Fantasy IX is there aren't really side quests? Or are they... Like, I don't know. Are there? I feel like it's pretty linear.
I would say there are. They're not always noticeable as side quests.
It's very minimal, though, right? It's not like a Western...
They're relatively minimal, I would say. Certainly in Final Fantasy IX. I think in Final Fantasy VIII, there's a lot more of them, and there may even be some in Final Fantasy IX that we didn't cover. So what often happens in that sort of generation of Final Fantasy games is there are side quests that you have to hunt out. Like, you have to talk to the person... at the right time.
They're not in your face.
They're definitely not in your face. But there was stuff when you would return to that city that got destroyed.
Yeah, there was
almost like there was bits and stuff with the troop that you were part of that would tie into that, and
but it
there
wasn't
were lots of little things, and they weren't.
It's not the same somehow, though.
No, it doesn't feel quite the same. There wasn't nearly as much hunting for them, and I feel like certainly in 10 and 12 and 13 and the Final Fantasy, or whatever, 13, 14, whatever, the one I played recently,
15?
The Final Fantasy series. No, 15 I haven't played yet, so I think it's 13. Because I
13-3?
14 is like the MMO.
Yeah, 14 is MMO, yeah.
Right,
there are 3 13s.
Yeah, 10, 12, and 13. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 13, the first 13. There are like hunting mechanics and definite side quests.
Some a little more modern then, yeah.
They're a little bit more modern, but they're also not necessarily called out in a direct way.
I feel like
they're a little bit more called out than the Chocobo thing was, but not a ton more. Like, if you start pursuing it, it's there. I think you want to do it, but it's not. It's totally unnecessary. That is totally I want to go and suck the mortar out of this game, and so I'm going to go find this stuff.
It's almost like elaborate secrets or something in a way, right? Like Easter eggs.
A little bit. I mean, the Chocobo thing, I didn't find that even remotely the first time I played it.
That thing sounded crazy. I still don't believe it exists.
Yeah, when I tripped across it, because you had found a Chocobo, when you were playing or in the forest, and I went and looked at it, and I was just like, what is this all about? And I found the Chocobo hunting game, and I'm like, oh my god, this is I've never seen this before, and I just went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, it's it's a testament to that kind of craziness. But your point about padding and filler for side quests in Western games, I mean, the JRPG padding and filler is the grinding of the combat. I would say, right?
Yeah,
they just do it differently.
Yeah.
Anyway,
no, certainly in Final Fantasy VIII in particular, I can remember getting to the end of the game and not being powerful enough to take on the final boss. Yeah. Which was something you ran into.
That's what happened to me.
I gave you a save game. So it's like, there's this problem there where they differentiate too much maybe, or they hide it too much. Yeah. And certainly in 8, I was lost, and I went and looked. I was like, oh, I missed all this stuff. I went and looked it up when I was finishing that game. I was like, oh my god, and now I can't go get any of it because the world has changed and whatever. I just can't get to it anymore. And I've missed out on all that content. I can only grind. Whereas here in Torment, it's more like, I don't know what are the important things. It doesn't really distinguish, as you pointed out, from a user interface or usability standpoint, what are the things that are actually critical to what I want to do. And it's It certainly doesn't do any difficulty adjustment on that either.
No, and that's kind of
the problem. That's the real bummer of these games in the Infinity Engine era. It's if you're not ready for it, I got to the end of Baldur's Gate 2 and I haven't seen it because I got to a point where it's I'm not powered enough and I can't go back.
The balancing, the balancing was off, it's
really hard.
It's a testing. It's basically a QA challenge.
Hard to be a bard. Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh man, you and your bards. That just totally threw me. I had a point I was going to make.
Well, I mean, I wanted to tie that into something you were talking about in pre-show, which was like some of this stuff that you can go and do is tied into this background lore and fiction.
Yeah.
You know, and when you talked about Final Fantasy IX, that kind of ties in as well. Like, what is the... Like, how much do you invest in that stuff? Yeah,
that's the other thing that kind of... the last note I wrote down in this last session that came at the very end. I don't even remember what jogged my memory on that. I mean, to some degree, it may even be some of my day job kind of questions for my own life, my own development life. But the thing about Planescape is just the lore and the background fiction and just the setting and essentially sort of like the sub-franchise of it all is really interesting and deep and just really wacky and unlike anything you've really played. It is this kind of like weird... It's almost like a JRPG to me in ways, right? Because it's just so opaque sometimes. And that's some of its sort of allure and cool factor for sure. But also, I guess I wanted to just kind of hit on the topic of like, what happens when that lore is so dense that it's just not resonating with you? You know, like you just like... You have to be really careful when you introduce, and in this case, for all intents and purposes, this is a new IP, even though it's not technically. But for somebody playing Planescape Torment, for someone playing Planescape Torment who hadn't played in the pen and paper version of this, like you're coming to this and you're like a Lim and like who the Queen of Pain and Sigil and Outlet, like all of these proper nouns are thrown around. And you're just like, I'm just going to sink in and just...
a ton of factions. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff.
Factions, yeah. It really... And it creates this anxiety for me of like... Especially because when I got stuck last night, and the only thing I've gotten a hint... I got a hint on one thing last night because I was just rushing. I couldn't find the portal to get to Ravel. I had the key. Figured that all out on my own. But then I couldn't figure out where the portal was. And... I feel like some of it was in the mire of like not fully even reading through the notes. I went back and read through the notes and tried to figure out what the next clue is. I went back to talk to Ravel and she's like, oh, the forge and the blah, 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 unfinished forge and fire. And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? And I just had missed some proper nouns someplace. I just had this worry that it was like something I'm overlooking that I should have remembered in my memory. But because the lore is so dense and thick and deep, it didn't log in my head, so I had to look it up. And so I don't know, just that kind of conundrum of, and then I brought up Final Fantasy to Brett in pre-show of like, and then Brett made the good point, which you should talk about now, is like every Final Fantasy kind of resets the lore in a way, and how do they achieve that and still succeed when you have to relearn everything? And I guess, you know, you just got to be up for it, and if you know that that's the case, you're okay with it because you're just going to sink in and have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think part of it is that you've only played the one, and so you don't have a sense of like how they fit together.
Because I felt the same way with Final Fantasy IX. Is my point? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know, but the thing is that each game is, well, with some exceptions, there are some that are direct sequels, but usually it's like Final Fantasy 13-2, and you're like, oh, okay, directly related to 13.
Right.
You know, if you play. And I'm going to try to think, like, the Final Fantasies I've played are, like, one of the really early ones, so, like, 4 or 5, I think, maybe even 1 or 2. But then, like, the sort of more modern ones, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 13, and none of those stories or worlds have anything to do with
completely. Them. So you're learning the canon freshly every time.
Exactly.
Completely fresh.
And really what you're learning on any given one for the first time is, like, oh, okay, so there's like basically 3 levels of any given magic spell. It's like, Fira. Oh, I can't remember. It's like, Fire, Fira, and Firaga or whatever. It's like there's these different levels of spells. And like there's these 6 elements or whatever, black and white magic and maybe holy magic. It might be 7 or 8 or whatever it is. But it's like, okay, there's some mechanical things that go on. But fundamentally, when you get right down to it, there's not a story continuity or lore continuity. There are, as I mentioned to Tim, like some signposts of like, okay, there's usually a character named Sid, And Sid is usually a man, for one thing. Sid was, I think, a woman in Final Fantasy 15, which I haven't played yet. But yeah, and there might be airships. Those are pretty common, and I mean, it's
and
just
chocobos.
And chocobos. Chocobos are there all the time, and whatever, and spiky hairdos. Like, I mean, there's things that show up again and again and again, but they're not. They're really still icing on the cake. And the first time you bite into a Final Fantasy, you're tasting the cake, and after that, it's like, oh, they're putting different frosting around this kind of central cake. So, I don't think fundamentally, like, I get it, like, having only played one, that you'd be like, oh, man, I had a hard time with the lore. But it's like, well, you'd have just as much a hard time with that.
Yeah. I guess as you're talking about that, it's a good point, and maybe this is, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe this is just my problem, because as we've talked about on the podcast probably quite a few times, like, I'm a lore nerd. And there's certain...
I mean, at a certain point, you have to say a lore idiot. I mean, you have to push it a little further.
All right, okay, fine. I'll go with that. But like, as you know, once I get invested in a franchise or a lore or a canon or some fiction, I go deep, and I like with World of Warcraft lore or Metal Gear or Witcher. Like, I'm reading the books, I'm playing all the games, and And so I really get invested in this continuity. And when I'm playing something that's either fresh or like Final Fantasy that kind of resets every time, I don't know. Maybe it's just. I would honestly say not as a sort of mechanical way, but it's sort of in a sense of playing it way. The Final Fantasy series is more like playing successive adventure games from LucasArts. Like, there's a feel sensibility to and a feel to it. Yeah, like how you have to think to make your way through these puzzles. Yeah. But not a direct. I mean, there's even more mechanical. Yeah. Through line through the Final Fantasy games and through a lot of JRPGs. I mean, they're all very similar in that way of the ones I've played. It's a cultural kind of
Right. There's a cultural thing.
You definitely know.
This thing. It's like, I know what the magic systems are, and I'm gonna.
You're playing a Final Fantasy game.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But, you don't, like, the story's all new. And, like, sort of the adventure game layer on top of the weird puzzles, in a LucasArts game is different each time. I think that's the way you need to think about it. But, I mean, getting back to Planescape Torment, like, it's impossible to know.
Yeah.
Because, like we talked last time, there's no handholds of, like, we have tropes, or we know which way to the MacGuffin. There's no usability that helps us. There's a lot of reasons to be lost.
Yeah. Well, and that's...
it's a maze.
Oops. Yeah, coming back to...
Put that microphone anywhere.
Luckily, it fits with the themes, but coming back to Planescape Torment, like you said, like, there's no way to know. I guess maybe the revelation that I'm finally coming to the conclusion of as we're talking about this, so thank you for working this through, because this is actually going to be a big takeaway for me for even my day job, is like, when you have an opaque lore, like, there is an added layer of usability challenge when that happens, right? That I think a lot of people, sometimes people think that it's an advantage to have that deep lore, and then sometimes you just don't even think about it, right? And so in Planescape Torment, not only do you have the usability of just the interface and the UX of it all, whether, because they don't really have the quest tracking isn't great, and you're not really sure which one's important, and there's no distinguishing between primary, secondary, all that stuff.
Right.
But
and you can't select one and get of like
you can't get direction.
Active quest, like right.
There's no direction at all.
Submap, like off the sort of world map.
Right. Yeah. So not only is there that just the basic obvious stuff, but then there's this additional layer of unspoken usability of just grokking the world and who is who and what is what and what the rules are and the proper nouns and all that stuff. And if you don't have something to account for that stuff, then it adds another exit point for the player to get stuck and just frustrated. Unless you really, really get into it and it connects with you. And this is just a weird world, so I think it's going to be hard to connect to people.
I was gonna connect that back to the Infinity Engine games generally, is that, in general, these games are mostly set in hyper Tolkien, like the Forgotten Realms, like
super relatable.
Exactly. It's like it's the D&D campaign you've always played, and it's this game doesn't do, it doesn't have weird stuff where it's like, oh, the dwarves make crazy golem machines or anything like that might have come along later with Eberron or whatever. That was the, I don't know, the
is one of the later settings.
D&D 4 maybe settings. I don't even know at this point. But it's more like, all those games have a central conceit of like, okay, this is D&D that you're familiar with, that has been the same since 1976 or 7 or whatever it was. It's like, it's a known thing. It's a known quantity. All those modules you've played, all the characters you'd encounter, like, you're going to run into a character whose name isn't Strider, but I'll tell you, he's a half-elven ranger. Like, I mean, you're going to run into those characters again and again, right? I mean, you're just going to know what they are. And that's what Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are, and that's what Icewind Dale 1 and 2 are. Planescape is like, hey,
it throws everything out.
I was going to say, all those things none of it means anything. Sorry, you're not in that world.
Yeah, not only that, but
it doesn't build up that world for you.
No. Well, and that's what kind of full circle, the side quests are helping with that, right? Building that up, so if you're paying attention. But, like, I mean, there's, multiple characters are 2 classes. They're like dual classing it, right? And, well, I guess you have dual classing in D&D too, but... Yeah.
Well, and theoretically, you could too. Like, I don't know how that works actually, and I never took a second class with Nameless this time.
Well, you start as a fighter thief, don't you? I think I didn't.
As a fighter.
You're just a fighter because I didn't.
I am just a fighter. Actually, maybe you're not because of how you invest your points or whatever. But I just was a straight up fighter.
I think I'm a fighter thief. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I was looking for the lady. I think it's a lady to change to. I wanted to change to a mage.
There are a number. You can do that at a number of points. So it's not like you can only do it in Hive or Clerk's Ward or whatever. You can do it even in Cursed, I believe.
I can find somebody to teach me how to be a mage?
Yes.
Huh. Well,
yeah, actually, in the bar, there's a bar there.
Okay.
Run by, like, something Barse, I think is his name. I can't remember his name, but it's some weird name. But, you can talk to somebody in that bar, and they'll be like, you can train as a mage from them. And a thief. Yeah, so you can, at different points, like, get different proficiencies, and, like, I haven't done any of that.
It's there's a lot of stuff in this game that, like, I'm looking at all the different...
I did it the first time. I definitely, like, one of the things as a player of RPGs I always like to do is I often play a rogue class. So not necessarily a thief, because I often play a bard because I'm an idiot. But, like, I play...
You said it.
Yep. I play a rogue character because I hate it when there's things I can't unlock. Like, that just drives me nuts. Like, it drives me crazy. And this game actually does a pretty good job. You can just select Anna, right? And she's, you can keep putting points into those things for her when she levels up. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go in and I'll make her really good at locks and, doors. The 2 things that you care about.
That's why I didn't take Ignis. I didn't care that I didn't take him because I wanted a balanced party, and I wanted to be the mage. And so I figured he was a mage. Is he a mage?
He is a mage, yeah. Of course.
And so I didn't want dual roles there.
He's basically a ranged fighter, though, because, I mean, although you can stop at any time and have people cast spells, most, like Dakon can do that, and I almost never do this stuff. But as the game gets more difficult, even playing on an easier difficulty setting for combat, I find myself pausing and like, okay, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna make, Ignis cast this spell, this high level spell. I'm gonna make, Dakon cast some spell. I'm gonna specifically make Fall from Grace do some healing, and I, playing on a little bit easier combat setting, that's mostly not necessary. But in some of the bigger battles, you're like, oh man, I need some more power, I need to be more careful about those thoughts.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start doing that. I did I had to do some of that in the Ravel fight, but
it slows things down so much. I mean,
it's clunky. Like, I just I've never liked that hybrid style in any of the BioWare stuff.
It's funny having played, now Fallout again, and this in a kind of tight time space. I'd much rather Fallout.
Fallout's so good.
Where it's like just it's your turn to make a decision. Like, this character makes a decision, then this character makes I'm at that point where I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, when we started this, and you said I never really liked it, and I didn't feel like it did a good job on the combat, I was like, oh, this combat was fine. And then playing it again, I'm like, oh yeah, this is why it's not fine, because you don't know where your entry is. You don't know when to pause.
Yeah, the rules are unclear.
It's really very kind of tricky of like where are the boundaries.
I mean, you could I don't know. Are you playing with AI on or off?
I play. Everybody does their own thing.
Yeah, because if you turn that off, you could super micromanage everybody if you really wanted to.
Yeah, no, certainly, and I did that with like Icewind Dale.
But that's like just madness.
Yeah, no, it takes a long time. It's not well suited to it. I mostly, and I am playing on a lesser difficulty setting for combat, I mainly just like pick every character except Fall from Grace and just say, okay, hammer this guy. Okay, now hammer this guy. Now hammer this guy.
Yeah, that's all I do too.
One after the other.
So did you? So I never got switching topics a little bit, but back to mazes. The Lady of Pain. What's her name? The Queen.
The Lady of Pain.
Lady of Pain. I never got put into a maze of hers.
Oh, that was the other maze. So, like Ravel is in a maze that is. I'm glad you brought that up. But like Ravel has a maze that she's been imprisoned in for a long time.
Yeah,
yeah. After killing that Davis, I spent a lot of time doing subquests in the Hive, Clerk's Ward, and Lower Ward. Mostly just trying to find my way through that maze that we kind of talked about. At one point, going from one screen to another, I think I was looking for that character Mar that I've talked about. Like, I didn't know where he was. I'm like, I don't remember that. I went looking for that guy. I was just like, he's in the Hive somewhere. Let me just go screen to screen. At some point, I did a level load, and when I arrived on the other end, rather than getting a, just loading into the next level, I get a little cutscene where I'm like, oh, it's me, and I'm kind of walking in. It's just me and walking in, and then the Lady of Pain shows up behind me, and like there's ominous music, and I turn around. This is all cutscene, pre-rendered cutscene, not an in-engine cutscene. And I turn around, and it's like, oh man, and she kind of comes after me, and I fall down. I'm kind of backing away, and then I'm in a maze.
Weird.
Yeah, and I'm in a maze that is like a circular hedge maze. I don't know if you can sort of distinguish, but it's like a hedge maze. Mm-hmm. That you would cut in a cornfield or whatever. But it's circles, concentric circles, and so there's paths. And rather than having you can't just cut through anywhere, you have to follow the paths. And then on the outsides, there's like almost Stonehenge-looking structures, like two pillars with a stone across the top. And you can go... All of those are portals.
Whoa.
And there's maybe...
Where do they go?
10 or 11 of them. And they go back to the maze. And usually they go to the opposite end of the maze. Yeah,
that didn't happen to me.
Here was another hour and a half of my life. So I went, at least... I went and I was in there and I'm like, okay. And ultimately, you can make your way up to the sort of northern edge of the maze or northeast. There's like a little fire pit and some bones and stuff. And you can find a thing that explains, and it's you. You've been here before, and on your own skin and using your own bone, you made a journal that you wrote in with your own blood to explain how to get out of the maze. So you've been here before.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so and there was even a thing where you had to pull a bone out of the binding to actually understand the journal. I'm butchering that a little bit now, but that was basically the thing. It's the journal itself didn't tell you unless you did this extra step, which all is sort of like a dialogue, interface. And then so you read this thing, and it's you have to go through the same door twice to get to the gate that'll take you out. That
old trick.
But it's more complicated than that, because what that actually does is take you... this took me a long time of going through every gate that I went through twice. I'd go through a gate, and I'd path back, and I'd go through the gate again, and be like, oh, okay, well... It took me a while to figure out the pattern, which is every time you go through a gate the second time, you will end up at a gate that was 2 or 3 clockwise from the gate that you went into the second time. and there's one gate that's not attached to the rest of the map. So you have to figure out, like, which gate do I want to go through twice to take me to that gate that I can't get to in any other way, and then a portal act, and that'll take you out. It was
maddening,
really good to figure out, and really terrible to spend an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm kind of
a lot. I mean, the shades chase you, the shades that we're going to run into later, with this kind of Gorgon style hair and all that stuff.
Yeah, wow. So I'm kind of glad I didn't.
No, you didn't miss out.
But also, yeah, it sounds interesting.
It's an interesting puzzle with not a lot of. I mean, it's an interesting puzzle for 15 minutes.
Not for
90.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. That's one of the real issues with the game, is that sometimes these things take a long time to figure out, and you're just spinning your wheels.
Out where they're welcome.
Yeah, and in 1999, internet.
Yeah.
Not what it is today. So.
Did you, speaking of shades, did you ever have a shade approach you in the middle of the clerk's ward?
No.
Yeah, so I was just walking around outside, minding my own business, going from one building to another, and a shade just comes down the street at night and comes and attacks me. And this was before I had been to Ravel, of course, and so I didn't know the significance of shades. Them being shades of your previous lives, which I think is hilarious because, and kind of brilliant because you die so much, right? And it's like you're reborn, but then in a way you're creating these monsters in the process, which I think is conceptually cool, even though it may not be literally what happens. But yeah, I don't know. It was just a weird one-off thing that just happened, and I killed the shade, and that was it. Nothing came from it. And then I was like, "Well, that's weird."
Yeah, I killed quite a few in that maze that the Lady of Pain sent me to, because they just start showing up.
Yeah.
And they kind of show up at the corners with Ravel, but you can avoid them, like, you know. Yeah,
easy to run away from them there. Yeah, but,
yeah.
Well,
interesting stuff. A lot of stuff going on. All right, what do you say we take a break?
Let's take a break. Yep.
And we'll come back. We have some feedback, and we have the results of our drawing. We've reached our review threshold, so I want to give away some gifts.
Sounds awesome.
All right, we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back from the break. As we looked at this week's reviews, we actually finally got to that 75 review target we were talking about, which is awesome.
Thank you.
That's me clicking on iTunes on my phone. So internationally, we're actually a little higher. So I appreciate people from around the world. Partially because of the things we're sending out. I'm going to be sending things out to people in the U.S., and so the drawing kind of will address those folks. Apologies to the handful of people we've gotten from outside the States. Yeah, anyway, we'll get to that at the end of sort of our discussion and feedback section. We have a couple of emails this time, and then we're going to start making our way through the backlog of email. Tim, I think I gave you the first one.
Okay, this email is from Tim Denton. Denton, interesting. That's a Deus Ex reference there, maybe? I'm sure that's his real name. Isn't Denton? Casey Denson? Denton? Anyway. Good afternoon. I heard you on the Kotaku Split Screen podcast and thought I'd have a listen. I must say it's a fantastic podcast and I'm hooked. I've blitzed the Soul Reaver, Hitman, and Resident Evil episodes and about to start the Final Fantasy. Love the discussion and I have some questions. Question number 1. How do you pick the games you're going to play? Do you want to answer them as we go, or do you want me to read them all?
No, read all of them, and then we'll kind of get
what
to them. What
difficulty do you play them on? And then the third question is, what are your own personal favorite types of games to play versus to develop?
Those are three different sorts of questions. So, maybe we should have taken them one at a time. What was the first question? Like, how do you pick them?
Yeah, how do we pick our games for the podcast? I assume to play. One of the one of the things we do try to do is think about some relevance or timeliness of the landscape of the time, and so. Like as an example, when we played the Ueda games, Last Guardian was coming out, and so we thought it would be good timing to go back and look at his previous games or their.
Right. And we played TIE Fighter because Rogue One was coming out.
Rogue One was coming out,
in sort of in the greater culture, and we played. What else did we play that was tied into?
Well, like Hitman, I suggested Hitman 2 because it was kind of the classic older Hitman, and the new reboot was coming out, right?
Absolutely.
And I think System Shock, even our first game, they had announced System Shock 3 was going to go into development.
Right. The new and a reimagining of the original.
Yeah.
So normally we try to find those ways to key into whatever's going on in games today. So. Right now we're playing Planescape Torment. Well, Torment, Tides of Numenera just came out this spring. Last year we played Fallout, and they had the Wasteland 2 plus the Wasteland re-release on Steam. It's all
Fallout.
We're trying to at least be a little bit tied into sort of the lingua franca of what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. Our way of kind of like, because we're not playing modern games, it's not like we're going to be part of the the modern zeitgeist of whatever's been talked about at the time, but it's our way to kind of connect the dots there a little bit. And if someone's thinking about, I'm playing this new cool game that just came out, and there's a legacy in this other thing. So I don't know. Yeah. That's what we try to do.
Yeah, and as far as I was going to say, as far as Final Fantasy IX goes, I was really just trying to punish Tim for making me play Hitman 2. So
yeah,
it's not always tied to a specific event, but we do definitely try to tie them together. The second question was difficulty level?
Yeah, difficulty level. Yeah, what do you typically play them on?
I am pretty mixed. Like, I generally try to play just kind of like default, whatever. Like, I don't change anything. With Planescape Torment, that has been, knowing it was going to be kind of long, and we're going to make it into 6 episodes, I also just was like, you know what? The combat in this game is not the important thing.
Yeah, me too.
So I dialed that down. I know you do too.
Yeah.
But that is unusual for me, and normally I play it just on whatever the default setting is. I don't change it. Normally I'm playing, often I'm playing games that I actually still own. I'm playing off the discs that I actually bought back, whenever, 15, 20 years ago. So for me, I normally just play it whatever the default is. In some cases, that's easier than the first time I played them. Like System Shock 2, I played on the hardest difficulty. As a perfect example. Warcraft, I wouldn't say so much.
That's right, we played Warcraft. I totally forgot.
Yeah.
And that was around the time Legion came out, so that's why we were playing that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty much a default guy through and through for the most part. And on the podcast, I think because it's such a breakneck pace and hard to, for us to keep up with the podcast, I will go down in difficulty quite a bit, off and on if the game allows it. But pretty much try to stay at default. Occasionally, if I really like a game, I will definitely bump it up just to, go deep, but I don't do that for the podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, in general, I'm a person who will play... I will play games, especially the first time we played a lot of these games. I played, from 97, 98, when I started in the industry to, 2000, even into 2004 or 5 when I was moving here to Maryland or whatever. I was playing all the games I played at that time. I was playing on the hardest setting, which to me,
that's crazy.
As an old person now, I just feel like, what the hell
was I thinking? You're also an achievement and trophy.
Yeah, but none of that was there then.
Yeah.
I was more just like, I'm going to measure up against this thing, whatever.
Yeah.
But as far as like, the final question was like, how do we pick our next game? No.
The last one is what's your favorite type of game to play versus to develop?
Oh, play versus develop. Yeah. Go. That's you.
Well, I mean, I have not had the opportunity to work on a kind of, more traditional RPG. And I kind of consider that a blessing and a curse to some degree because it's my favorite game to play, I would say. I love shooters and have mostly worked on shooters and play them for sure and always enjoy them. But I think for me at least, I enjoy playing a genre at home that I don't work on and as just a kind of palate cleanser. So RPGs like Witcher or BioWare stuff and such, though that particular version is not always my favorite, but and then MMOs, right? WoW, and I also was playing Secret World off and on, and Lord of the Rings online, and so those, RPGs and MMOs are what I typically like to play versus develop. I haven't made either of those myself.
Yeah, I'm a little different from Tim. I think I've probably had, believe it or not, I've had a little bit broader experience as far as like games I make versus games I play.
Yeah, you've been all over.
Yeah, no, I had the sort of space shooters that we made, and then with first-person shooter. I also worked on, certainly some RPGs, and now I'm working on kind of what normally you'd call a walking simulator, and another thing I've worked on that's that I don't really talk about, but it's like I've worked on a wide variety of challenges. For me, as a programmer, I am most interested in working on things that will kind of challenge me and be interesting, and I don't really care what they are. Genre-wise, like, I don't care. Like, when I started into the industry, I worked on Starfighter. I remember Darren Stinnett, who was our boss on those first couple games, saying, well, I'm going to hire you. You're going to have to come in and really understand how flight sims work. And I was like, okay, so you're telling me I'm going to come in and you're going to pay me and I'm going to play some flight sims for a while. And he's like, yeah, pretty much. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. I can live with that. And I did. I mean, I played like Joint Strike Fighter and like the F-22 and one of the Falcon games at the time, and MiGs, the one he had worked on. Like, I played a lot of flight sims when I first started at LucasArts, and figured out like, how are we going to build a thing that does this but isn't quite so heavy. As I've gotten later in my career, programming has been more about how do we make this thing perform as amazingly well as we possibly can on the hardware we have. And so for me, that has changed a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about the difference between the two of us, too, in that regard, because one thing that isn't completely true, but I do find and we've talked about this, I feel like on one of the previous episodes, based on some questions somebody asked us, is because I'm coming from a creative direction and design perspective, like, designers do tend to end up, especially on AAA games, tend to end up kind of specializing in a way. And so because I've only worked on, third-person action stuff when it comes to Tomb Raider, and then mostly shooters, first-person shooters other than that, that is what I'm most qualified to do, if I were to get another job, So, like, for me, going and actually working on another genre is a stretch for somebody to hire me into that role, because I don't have the expertise in that, And so for you, though, your skills will transfer more widely because programming is so fundamental.
Yeah. I mean, the only things I really haven't done in any great detail are like networking. Yeah. Which is something people prize. Like, I mean, I've actually
there are specialists in programming too.
I've had cold calls about like, will you come do the networking on our game? So that happens. But and I could do it. I just I don't know if I want to. And then I mean, there is specialization, but I mean, generally, programmers are more about like things that it doesn't matter what genre you're working in. So
there's a versatility too. Yeah.
So it's just a thing. It's a difference. I mean, I've never written any gameplay code for anything but a flight sim, so I don't know.
Oh,
maybe
that's
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, only the Starfighter games have I really written.
It's funny because I think of you as a gameplay programmer first, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's because how we started.
Yeah.
All right. Second email is from our buddy Jason Schreier, who is at Kotaku. He's mentioned us on their podcast, and I appeared on that 2 or 3 weeks ago. Called Split Screen. Great cast, a lot of fun. Kirk, who's the other co-host, also a buddy. He says, "Hey, Brett and Tim, been catching up, and the show is excellent as always. Thank you. I'll keep this short, but I thought I'd chime in with an anecdote and a question. Anecdote: I played Planescape Torment when it first came out and used a strategy game the whole time. I imagine that many people who enjoyed the game back then did the same, and maybe that's one of the reasons it's beloved. Because you guys are right that the quest interface is a mess, and the solutions can be obscure, although there is an in-game hint about the key to the portal in the mortuary. Fair enough. Make sure you guys tell everyone that your name is Adon, by the way, or at least read up on him." And he gives a link, so I'll put that in the show notes. The question that follows up is, what sort of influence has this podcast had on your day jobs? Should we expect to see lots of fairies in Tacoma? Will the next Halo have sprawling dialogue trees? I'd love to hear some specific stories about how playing and discussing these old games has affected the way you both make games today. Thanks. So, hey, shout out, Jason. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks.
I'm going to throw out there, I'm reading Jason's book in he sent me a copy. It's coming out in a couple of months. Worth reading. A lot of fun. Talks a lot about game development. I'll plug it again when it's closer so you can order it. But it's really well, lots of reporting chapter by chapter on different games.
Oh, cool.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I like his reporting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah. I kind of.
Well, let's tackle the anecdotes first as far as strategy games go. Because for us, that was a thing that was changing when we started in the industry. Like strategy games or strategy guides, rather, were becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And I never played. I mean, I had strategy guides for a couple of games, but I've never played a game with one anywhere near me.
No, me neither. And what I would do though is when I finished a game, if I really liked it, like I did this with Fallout 1, I think. When I finished the game, I would buy the strategy guide afterwards, and then I would kind of go back and kind of look and see what I missed or how you could do things differently.
Wow.
And
you're a nerd.
And sometimes that would actually spark me to play it a second time, but usually not. But yeah, that's what, because if I really like something, I go so deep and get invested into it, and so like I kind of want to go and like get the book to go with it to kind of complete the set and know all of the things. Yeah, it's pretty dumb, I guess, but
I mean, I want to say that the first time that I never used a strategy guide per se. I have a couple from our own games. I have a Republic Commando one, I think. Yeah, I do. They're near me. So I have both the Starfighter and a Republic Commando games. So I have those, and I have the much bigger Skyrim and Fallout 3 ones downstairs somewhere. But as a player, I never really used them. And I can totally understand why people use them, and yet I never... It was never a thing for me.
I think it's fine to use them. Like, I don't... There's no judgment there for sure. But the repercussions for me, I think, because I have some mental block with it and that I try not to, what ends up happening, and this happened to me with Planescape Torment the first time, I think I mentioned it in the first episode, I will get stuck and I will put a game down, sometimes for years. Yeah. Because I will I guess I'm stuck, and like I'll forget about it or whatever.
Yeah, no, my friend Jamie Fristrom says... That's what's called a shelf-level event. And you take the game, you put it back on the shelf because you're just so like, I can't even be.
That's so Jamie. That's a great quote.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a great quote. Yeah, it's and I've had that with games. I mean, I can't. I can't think of one off the top of my head where I had that, but
so this one happened for Planescape for me. The other one that you
for you.
I think you mentioned it. You mentioned it to me all the time and give me crap over it. Link's Awakening, right, was one that I put down for like 10. I don't know, could have been 10 years. And then the other one that this happened to me was Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth, which was
amazing.
Which ended up being like this white whale for me that I just last year went back to. So it was like nearly 20 years. Well, and I love Call of Cthulhu, so I
can pick the level. Is it that chase level?
I don't remember where I put it down originally.
Oh, yeah, because when I played through it, I got to a chase level, and Reed Knight, who we've talked about and interviewed actually for I emailed him because I knew he was playing it, and I was like, "Oh my God, Reed, what would this?" And he was like, "That level's amazing." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me! It's killing me to get through this thing." Because there's a level where it's like. Make the right choices at every point.
Yeah, it's very punishing.
Recently, I had this experience with Soma, which is an indie title by the people who made Amnesia, The Dark Descent, and Frictional Games. And I got to a certain point in that game, and I've talked with Chris Sulentrop, who loved the game, and he was like, "Oh, you got to push past it." And I'm like, "Dude, I get to this one point in the game, and I can't get past it. I've literally, at this point, and this ties into Jason's strategy game question, I've gone and I've watched videos of how people do this section, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
I do the same thing, I think, that they're doing. I can't do it, and I'm so annoyed. I installed that game, and I got to that point, and I uninstalled it, and then I reinstalled it and tried to play it from that point, and I was like, okay, F this game forever because I'm just so annoyed.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as like using whatever strategy guides and videos or whatever, or even, to be honest, like even cheats if they're available, like if you're enjoying the game, like, do it.
Yeah. Hey, it's your game. We gave it to you.
Yeah.
I've never been precious about that stuff. I mean, I don't often do it myself, but I don't like, God, we put the game in your hands, and if we messed it up, that's what the cheats are for.
No game is perfect. So it's like if that's a true statement, then it's not on you, it's on us. But yeah. I mean, to the other part of the question, which is a much bigger one, I think, and we should maybe move on. But as far as like how the podcast has influenced me, like I actually wish I could think of some examples. Specific examples. I'll maybe try to make that homework. But
I mean, the one obvious thing for you is like. We need, and this was something that somebody pointed out to us, which is like, you do a Zelda thing where you need the thing to get the thing, so you can go to the thing, right? Which was like our 8 things in 2 minutes quotation.
That famous moment, Well, I guess, like in the macro sense, I mentioned it this episode. Actually, the podcast has definitely allowed me. Somehow, I've given myself permission to take a step back and rethink assumptions that I've made in the past because of the way things have been for me for over 20 years now. And that's just been nice because I think you just get into these ruts. There have been some specific things, especially like when we talk about the lore stuff we were talking about this episode and a few other odds and ends, which frankly I probably can't even talk about and shouldn't talk about in detail. But the podcast definitely changed my way of thinking day to day. And I reference, sometimes I'll even say I'll be in a meeting and we'll be talking about something with the game, and I'll actually talk about a conversation we had on the podcast about a certain design choice or something. And of course, nobody else in the room had listened to the episodes. They don't know what I'm talking about.
I also want to note that I haven't been paid for that.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay, the check's in the mail. But I'll just relate this revelation that or conclusion that we came to that actually did apply to the conversation I was having with the people at work, and it actually was useful. So I don't know. I'll think of some specific examples, but it's definitely helped me. I'm still learning how to be a developer 20 years later.
I mean, I would say that it's an early art form. So,
yeah.
For that. From that point of view, and because it involves so many different skill sets, that also makes it difficult to apply lessons.
It's freaking crazy.
Yeah, from thing to thing. But then even beyond that is like, okay, I sit down and I'm a writer, say, crazy to think about, but I sit down and I do that, and it takes me 6 months, maybe, if I'm writing kind of a popular thing, a genre thing, with conventions or whatever. It takes me 6 months to sit down and write this book. That is not how game development works. I have never worked on a game that took 6 months at all. Even working on a game that was a port, it took us 6 months, but it had already been built before we started it. So it's like, it's hard to say when Jason asks, well, what are you applying to the thing you're working on? So, well, for me, working on Tacoma, I came in too late on Tacoma to say, okay, we need this thing that I drew from Hitman 2. To bring into Tacoma. And I'm not thinking of any specific example, but it's not like, it's just like, it was at the point that I came in, it was difficult for me to say we need this thing. There have been some things that we've made changes to recently that we got feedback and we thought about, like, how do you approach that or whatever. And I think back to, we mentioned Jamie Frischram earlier in the episode that, he and I got to know each other around the time he was making Spider-Man 2. And he was talking about, we have this mission where so-and-so is chasing you through the city, and it's like time-based or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And it, a lot of players, they were doing, testing, usability testing on that. He said a lot of players would get stuck on this level. For them, that would be a shelf-level event, basically, like I described. And I said, well, I've been playing these other games, and here are the things that I could take and say, well, maybe try this or maybe try that. And for that game, and it's a game where I actually got credit, for in the credits of the game.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, no. Well, he couldn't pay me cash, so he gave me credit. He said he asked me about that. We were playing chess online, and he said, well, I'm having this problem. I said, well, have you considered like just making it easier over time? The player starts again and you make it easier. The player starts again, you make it easier. Slow things down or whatever. They're mostly the chase missions in that game that made it very difficult for players. And I said, well, if you just slow the antagonist down a little bit, players won't know that they're slower because they failed. They won't know, And so you take these things that you've learned from other games, and I don't remember what I picked that up from, and they apply. They apply forward to things that you don't know you had challenges with yet.
Mm-hmm.
And in Jamie's case, it was like, I didn't know, like I didn't think about like just making that part easier, this one part of this one level or whatever, easier, because they don't know it's harder. They just think they got better.
Yeah. It's all perception. Yeah. Exactly.
The player thinks, I got through it this time. And they actually have that moment of what Huizinga, I guess, calls Fiero, where they have like this moment of like excitement of like, I beat it. Oh, I finally beat it, right? And if you make that like easier after a couple of tries, and then even easier after 6 or 8 tries,
that's all that matters.
It's all that matters.
Yeah.
Players don't know. They beat it.
Yeah,
that's all that matters to them, and that happens actually in Warcraft, World of Warcraft that you mentioned earlier. Like, when it's like I have to pick up a thing and it's 10% of the time that it drops, and 10% means that it could be forever. It's not you're going to pick it up 1 in 10. It means if the random number generator someday generates a number between 1 and 10 or 0 and 10 or whatever, but the thing that Blizzard did that was really great is they went and said, you know what, people expect that basically it's going to become really common after 5, and by 10, definitely I'm going to get this thing that's 1 in 10.
Yep. Yeah.
And they just force that. They make that part of their calculations.
Yeah.
It's like, really, it's 1 in 10 the first time, but it's really 3 in 10 the second time and 5 in 10 the third time. And by the time it's 5 in 10, it's really 10 in 10. You're getting it every time.
Yeah. It's provable, and especially in Legion these days, like the tuning of that is very provable. Like you can do any of those random. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are the sorts of things that I pick up from playing games. not specifically. I'm not picking examples specifically from what we've played, but it's like those are the sorts of things that we play that we pick up when we play, and
they get logged somewhere in our memory and get pulled back out.
And the other thing I was going to say is that we start in games and they take 2 or 3 years. So it's not like, we've played 7 or 8 games or whatever for the podcast. And it's like, well, okay, 7 or 8 games, but to the one game each we're building at this time. Mm-hmm. It takes a while, it takes a while for those things to feed back in, which is itself its own conversation. But anyway.
Yeah. We're running long. Do you want to do the drawing now? We have
so much backed up feedback. I want to hit them. So let's hit them quickly because they're quick.
All right.
Okay. So you have one from Andrew.
Okay. Discovering the Classics by Andrew, if that is their name. I don't know if that's Brett adding that or if...
No, I didn't add that.
Andrew added
I'm wondering, is Andrew, if that is their name, if that is your real name?
That's meta. Andrew, well done, sir. An informative... comfortable, all right, I love that descriptor there for a new one. An informative, comfortable, funny conversation about games that shaped an industry. I haven't managed to fully play along yet, but I have tracked down videos of some of the games to refresh my memory when the mists of time are too deep. My only fear about the entire series is that the hosts will burn out because of their breakneck pace. That's my only fear too, Andrew, if that is their name. I do think about that from time to time.
I feel that. I'm actually feeling that this particular podcast, and that's partly because you're catching up now, but I was catching up earlier when I had to
You overtook me, darn it. Yeah. The one time I was ahead and I lost my lead.
I've overtaken you, but the problem was that when we started out, I had a crash bug in the original game.
Bad luck there. I fear that too. I enjoy doing it enough that I think that I'll always try to power through, and I don't always I don't always hit the mark on the episode that we decided, because I'm behind on something or whatever, and I will occasionally, like I did this time, I'll look at a hint on something that I'm stuck on just to keep it moving. So luckily in this day and age, there's ways to keep us going, even though we might be, even though it's going pretty fast for us, breakneck pace, as he says.
Yeah. I picked a lot of short ones this time. So the second one we have is from Aamane, which is definitely not your real name, I'm sure. I feel bad for your parents if that's what they chose. But anyway, he says, consistently fascinating. Been listening since Final Fantasy IX, and it's been great, even for games I'm not playing. The change in perspective in listening to game developers as opposed to game critics is fascinating. Finally played along to a series of episodes with a link to the past, and it's an amazing experience if you have the time. Great without playing along as well. So thank you, Aamane. That is definitely, we're fine with people going back, and like I said, I have a colleague, from Bethesda who was like, oh man, I totally want to play the original Fallout and listen along and play as I go. I'm like, that's fine. If you want to just listen to it, that's also fine. Knock yourself out, Don't try to keep up with us. We're playing at a pace that is weird for us.
And you can listen and play and take as long as you want to play the next section, right?
We're not super spoilery, and often these are games you've played, so knock yourself out. Anyway.
Next one for me?
Yeah, you have the last one. I think
this is a short one, I get excited when I see a new episode pop up by Artorius01, if that is your real name.
I'm sure it is.
Artorius,
there's probably been 3 or 4 in that film, like Artorius01, Artorius02.
Artorius. I feel like Artorius is the name of a StarCraft character as well. But and then the little addendum here is Anthony Gallego sent me here on a noble quest of discovery and wonder. Thank you, Anthony. Call out again. Inspiration for the podcast was having fun listening to Rebel FM for me back in the day. Do their game clubs? They did their own game.
Do you know Anthony Gallegos from that?
Yeah. Well, I met him through. We just kind of connected through his podcast and stuff, and then he's not a developer.
He interviewed me for Star Wars, I think, StarWars.com.
Yeah.
Last year when I did maybe 2 years ago when I did those Republic Commando videos on YouTube. So,
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, he's a freelance. He still does freelance journalism for games, but he actually now is a developer. He works at Gazillion. Cool. And he's still on Rebel FM. So shout out to Rebel FM. They're another great podcast I listen to weekly with he and Arthur and Matt Chandernay and oh my god, oh my god, I feel terrible.
You look it up while we're going to turn now to our drawing while Tim feels ashamed. And gets those ruddy red cheeks that his Santa created content character creator is all about. We've been talking about having
James
a little
Faulkner.
drawing.
I didn't even look it up. James Faulkner came to me.
I just had to distract you with
their
Santa.
newest member.
Yeah. So we've had a little drawing here. I did a random number generator for the people we've had who have reviewed us on iTunes. Thank you. I want to say we're going to keep doing this every 5% that we get. So we got our first 5%, which is around 75.
Spoken like a true programmer.
Yeah. Our every 0.05 that we get of the multiple of the people who listen to us. And, every time we get to that kind of threshold, we'll try to do a new drawing. And we'll draw some things from our past, either our shared past or, individual past as developers. Our first runner-up this time is actually one of the reviews we read this time, because we're a little bit behind. That is Andrew, if that is their name. And to him,
nice.
we're going to send a prize of a Star Wars action figure. So this is from our LucasArts days. When we were making Republic Commando, they sent us all kinds of stuff from the ranch. They were doing some kind of stormtrooper thing. Making that a thing. Maybe because of Attack of the Clones or whatever. But I have an action figure still in the bubble wrap, whatever.
Blister pack is the official term.
Pack.
If that's you're searching
still
for.
Still the blister pack, yeah. A fan's choice of the Ralph McQuarrie concept of a stormtrooper. Stormtrooper with a laser pistol in the left hand and a lightsaber in the right hand. Not in perfect condition, but because I've moved and put things in boxes, but it's in pretty good shape. Never been played with, and it will be yours, Andrew, if that is their name. Send us an email. Item number 2. This is and this one goes back a ways into late last year, I think. This is from the San Francisco Kid. He wrote to us about loving the PCast, and PCast stood for podcast, and he wished that Karen spoke more often. You remember that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
God, man, I wish we could hear more from Karen. Yeah. I have three issues of Star Wars Starfighter Crossbones, which was a limited series from Dark Horse telling the sort of interim story, somewhat backstory of Nim, who was one of the main characters in the 2 Starfighter games. They're actually in great condition because I've read them once, and they were written by Hayden Blackman, who was our collaborator, and ultimately went on to both The Force Unleashed at LucasArts and later Mafia 3 with whoever the Mafia 3 is.
Hangar 13. I mean, he was one of the co-founders of Hangar 13 for 2K.
Hangar 13 is where
2K. His brainchild. Yeah, and also, by the way, Hayden is an accomplished comic book writer now, and co-wrote some of the best, probably the best Batwoman series in existence.
I love the Batwoman stuff. I actually have all of that myself. Maybe that'll be up for a future giveaway. But yeah, anyway, this was written by Hayden. It was illustrated by somebody Box and then inked by Fernandez. Anyway, it's gorgeous. I drug it out today. It was really fun to look at again, honestly, having not looked at it.
He's the best character.
Nim is great. It was voiced by Charlie Rocket, R.I.P. Great stuff. I love all of that. So I will send that to you, the San Francisco Kid. And then finally, the main prize, Mr. Eric Anderson, who says, my kind of club. I won't read the whole review, but we read it a few months ago. I'm going to send him my Fallout 3 Special Edition, which was a boxed set. It's got one of those lunch boxes in it, and I think maybe a bobblehead. I don't know.
It's got a bobble. It should have a. If you didn't mess it up, it's got a bobblehead.
It is entirely possible I messed it up.
Pretty sought after that bobblehead. Yeah. I have one because I have that same version.
I'm gonna have to look.
Has
I don't
a Pip-Boy clock that you actually can put on your hand, so it's not. Yeah, I mean it's.
If you have a small arm,
it's pretty rare, that particular one, right? The 4 one was hard to get too, but
it's not a huge box, so I feel like it's a lunch box. I don't know what's in it. I haven't opened it. Here's the problem. I don't know what's in it, but it's a special edition Fallout 3 for, I believe, Xbox 360. So what we want from all these folks, and I want to thank everyone who's done reviews. In the future, we're going to do this every 75 or so reviewers. I have stuff. Tim has stuff.
We have more stuff.
Yeah, we have plenty of stuff.
Cool
my God, the stuff.
More bribery, apparently.
Yeah. And what we're going to do is every 75 or so, until we're like, okay, we've given enough stuff away, we're going to give out new sets of stuff. I need addresses for these folks. So if you are Mr. Eric Anderson, the San Francisco Kid, or Andrew, if that is your real name, I need you to send me an email at devgameclub@gmail.com and give me an address. I will mail it. There's no cost to you. We're trying to keep those in the U.S. because of that, because sending something heavy like the Fallout 3 Special Edition would be expensive, if we were sending it to Finland. Apologies, Finland. Shoot us an email. If we haven't heard from you in 2 or 3 weeks, I'm gonna re-roll and pass those out to other listeners. Sorry, but that's the way it's gonna happen. Just I've got this stuff to get out of my house, so please get in touch, and I will send it along.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
Not to you.
Thank you for the reviews. And then. We talked a little bit about what we play and why we choose what we play. Did we even talk about what we're going to play next time?
Oh, we forgot to. No.
We totally forgot. Yeah.
Well, we could keep it to, I guess, next episode at this point.
No, we can. Yeah, let's keep it.
Because we have one more episode. Well, technically...
We talked about how we make the choices.
Yeah.
We have a couple more episodes that we're going to do here. The next episode for this series, we're going to finish off next time, and then we'll have a guest.
Yep.
Which we like to do. And we have a good guest.
We're a good guest.
You'll all be pleased to hear from this guest. I'm not going to say what his name is, but it starts with E and ends with Chris Avalone. So it's going to be good.
It doesn't start with E. Did you say
it starts with C?
Oh,
it starts with C and ends with Chris Avalone.
I don't know. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's recorded, so we have proof on what you actually said.
We have proof that I said C and Chris Avalone.
Okay.
Oh my God, did I just say it 3 times? You're practically giving it away. Nobody could have figured it out from the way I said it the first time. Okay, anyway.
How many more?
So we're going to have an interview with somebody in the next couple of weeks. But next time we'll finish the game. In the meantime, you can find us at DevGameClub. Send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com. We still want those reviews because, as I said, the next time we get to another 5% of our general listening audience, another 75 or so, we'll do another giveaway. You can do that. I am at Brett_Duville. He is
at Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
That's right. That's the guy they shot on Dallas. And then I guess that's about it. We're at devgameclub.com on the internet. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.